Another day, another illegal immigrant degenerate thug allowed to roam your country because Democrats need future voters. The little terrorists on college campuses should be the least of our worries because the real terrorists and rapists and felons and thugs are the ones streaming across our border. The show starts now. Oh, looky, looky. A Colombian national with a rap sheet, a convicted killer to be exact, was finally found and arrested by ICE in Boston this week. But he's been here since last November when he was apprehended in Arizona by Border Patrol, but then, shocker, released on the honor system. Yes, ye old trusty honor system, even though he was a convicted murderer in his own country back in 2016. The honor system for murderers, how progressive, how fancy. But he, like countless others, was just allowed to wander, to hide here in plain sight. I guess it just goes to show how well Biden's DHS is vetting these folks who are just looking for the American dream, right? Or as Joe Biden calls them, model citizens.
I love it when people say, why dreamers? Can you imagine a kid 2 years old saying, Mom, don't take me across Rio Grande, it's against the law. Give me a break. These have been model citizens.
Model citizens, just mamas and their babies, says Joe. Definitely not any rapists or murderers. Folks, in all the coverage of the campus misfit protesters the last few weeks, I think we've been strategically distracted from the greater threat, the real threat. Now, I'm not saying the anti-Semitism and allegiance to terrorist groups and ideologies isn't concerning, because it for damn sure is, but think about it. With the outrage coverage focused on that, Joe and pals have been able to divert our attention away from the most dangerous threat we face, the open border. The college kids are wannabe terrorists. We've got actual terrorists waltzing in while we are hyper-focused on the green hairs and the queers for Palestine. Now, this report didn't get enough attention, the one that showed that during an 8-month period from January through August 2023, roughly 200,000 illegal immigrants flew into the U.S. via the Biden Parole program facilitated through the CBP-1 app. Through this program, these aliens are flown here and then released into the shadows via that parole program. They are allowed to stay in the United States for at least 2 years and are eligible for work authorization. And guess where 80% of them went? Florida. This is a coordinated effort to pack illegals into red states, and mark my words, this is part of their long-term plan to use these illegals to gain power and keep power through either the census and redistricting efforts or through the illegals being directly given voting rights. So don't let the smoke and the mirrors distract you from the underhanded crap these Democrats are pulling on all of us while we're eating up salacious headlines about Stormy Daniels or the Queers for Palestine, because the bigger picture is far worse than all of that, and it will take decades to undo. Here to weigh in on that and so much more is Brandi Kruse, host of the unDivided podcast. Brandi, it's great to have you. I want to jump right in on my monologue there. I'm not saying that what's happening on the college campuses and these Queers for Palestine blocking roads or ripping up their diplomas at Columbia, I'm not saying that that's not worthy of coverage. But I honestly think that the Democrats would rather us focus on that than the illegal immigrants that are still streaming through our open border. Do you think I'm onto something?
Well, I do. I think it's funny, though, how the distracty, shiny object, it actually also makes Democrats look bad, but just maybe not as bad as the border situation. You know, you mentioned these migrant flights directly into the United States, and make no mistake, this is about getting them into the country in a way that people aren't paying attention to. And you know, the media tends to focus for good reason on what's happening at the southern border and the absolute disaster there. And then meanwhile, they're just flying them in through the back door. And you mentioned a lot of them end up in Florida, which is very interesting that I haven't heard, I guess, Ron DeSantis talk more about that. A lot of them were flown into Miami, into Fort Lauderdale, and for no reason that seems justified under the law. So they're saying this is about it being orderly, right? And so it's like they won't be coming across the border illegally and without any sort of vetting. They have to go through a process here. They have to cover their own flight and fly into the country. We know who they are. But at the same time, there really should only be two reasons for that, either an immense humanitarian issue or for significant public benefit. Who gets to decide whether it's a significant public benefit to directly fly in hundreds of thousands of migrants from all over the world into the United States? So it's about lessening what we're seeing on the ground at the southern border. I would also just say, Tomi, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this too, I really see a huge tie between what's happening on our campuses and this flood of illegal immigration. And what I see, and I've been to the college campus protest here at the University of Washington in Seattle, is some outside forces are pushing this anti-American sentiment. So you've got this anti-American sentiment and terrorists and stuff spilling across the border to do God knows what, laying in wait. And then you have college students praising North Korea and Kim Jong-un for supporting, Palestine. And I'm thinking this is an anti-American mind virus that is absolutely being planted by China, by Russia, by North Korea into the minds of our college students. So you have, as you said, terrorists in training, and then you have very real terrorists coming across the southern border.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that it's important to talk about young people and the ideologies that they possess and, the wrong choices that they're making or their emotional attachments to stupid things like the Queers for Palestine. I think it's important, but I just feel like if we have to pick something to put our attention on, to me, it's not only the illegals that are coming across that are, murderers, convicts, felons, rapists, possible terrorists. It's also the ones that are coming over, even when Joe Biden talks about the mamas and the babies. I'm sorry, they're still bankrupting our country. So that still bothers me that they're coming across our border, a lot of them unvetted, unchecked, and they're flying around our country. We've seen several airports that have even their own lane for the illegals that don't have proper documentation. That's wonderful because I can't go through with a water bottle, but whatever, that's another discussion. I just think right now the Democrats have a lot of things that are bad, but I think they would much rather us focus on the weirdos on college campuses ripping up their diplomas or walking out of a Jerry Seinfeld commencement speech than talking about inflation or talking about the fact that they have a wide open border that's going to bankrupt this country. So I think this is fine. I think people aren't actually as concerned about the Israel-Gaza conflict, and the polls are really showing us that. I think that there would rather be this outrage over that than the actual issues that people actually vote on. So I think that Biden's just fine with it. That's probably why he's been taking the position he's taking, because I don't think that this scathes him as much as other things.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And, a lot of these college students, look, you have a First Amendment right to look and sound like a moron. You do. If you want to tear up your diploma in front of people, if you want to, as a white privileged student on an Ivy League campus, wear a keffiyeh, like you do as long as you're not being violent or something, you can look and sound as dumb as you'd like. And you're right. This is an election year. And I wish Americans were more conditioned in an election year, a presidential election year, to really consider what stories are being pushed on them and why. In 2022, when it seemed like Republicans were going to have this huge win in November, you had the abortion issue that was just endlessly pushed on Americans in the media cycle. And of course, you had the Roe decision, and that's what helped Democrats avoid a electoral bloodbath, essentially. And so what is it going to be this year? What are they going to try to distract from with the help of their friends in the media? And what are they going to try to push Americans and fearmonger Americans over instead?
I mean, a number of things. Abortion is still going to be one of the issues. But there's another thing that's soaking up all the headlines. And again, I understand why. I'm not saying it shouldn't be covered. I'm not saying it's not important. It is historic. It is unprecedented. But that's this Trump criminal trial that's going on really as we speak. Michael Cohen yesterday testifying, today testifying, not sure when this is all going to wrap up. But this is really soaking up a lot of the media attention on the left and on the right. And when you watch it, I think most legal experts would agree that it's all a farce. We still don't know what the crime is. We still don't know why all this salacious information is pertinent to any of our lives or pertinent to a criminal case whatsoever. But I have to play you a fun clip because I think it just underscores if this Michael Cohen is supposed to be the undoing of Donald Trump. I don't know if they picked the right horse in this race, but he is also pitching himself for a reality show because he wants to be Donald Trump so badly. I have to play you the trailer for it because I think it's just quite frankly fun to watch. Let's take a look.
My name is Michael Cohen, and for years, I was the personal lawyer for a notoriously bad man.
Michael Cohen.
Michael Cohen.
Michael Cohen.
Trump lawyer and fixer Michael Cohen.
I fixed his problems, both professional and personal, gaining power, wealth, and notoriety for myself in the process. And I paid the price. Since then, I've been on a journey of redemption, working to set things right. But now I'm paying it forward, wielding the tools that I've learned for regular people in trouble. The little guy doesn't usually have access to people with my particular set of skills, but that's all about to change. I'll work with you, offering expertise, advice, and solutions to fix your problem. Together, we'll change your life. I am your fixer.
I mean, it's good stuff here. I think it's so funny to watch how desperate this man is. It's almost like he's trying to be Marcus Lemonis from The Prophet, who actually goes and tries to help struggling businesses. I think that that might be the model here. But beyond the fact that he's not going to fix anything for anybody, I think it just also shows how badly this person wants to be a celebrity.
I had not seen that. That's good. I'm crying a little bit because that was so funny. Yeah, it reminds me of Bar Rescue. You know the show Bar Rescue? When you go in there, I just don't know who's going to pick up this documentary. Can I tell you something, Tommy? And I have not said this publicly yet. So this will be a first time. So I came from the mainstream media world. You know, I did mainstream television for 10 years, and I was very anti-Trump. Very anti-Trump. I did not vote for him in 2016. I voted for Hillary Clinton. I voted for Joe Jorgensen in 2020.
Oh, boy.
It's probably the first time I'm going to vote for Trump. It's probably the first time I'm going to vote for Trump. Now, I don't like him anymore. He's still not someone I'd want to be friends with. I have some issues with some moral stuff. But when you look at the Stormy Daniels trial, we're talking about something that dates back not to the 2020 election, to the 2016 election. And for me, one of the big issues has been, being as red-pilled as I've been in the last 5 years in particular, has been looking at how hard people are trying to put him in prison. Like all these years later over things. And that is the light switch to me where, you know, I liked his policies. I don't like him as a person, but to go from, I would characterize it as despising him when I was in the mainstream media to 8 years later, we'll probably vote for him in November, has to reflect how a lot of Americans are feeling.
I have to ask you about that because I always want to ask people that are Republican, Democrat, somewhere in the middle, that say that they despise Donald Trump or that they have moral objections to Donald Trump. And I got to dig into that with you a little bit, not just for you personally, but I think that you represent a group of people, whether they're, you know, liberals that hate Trump or they're Republican never Trumpers that hate Trump. I just got to ask, what is it about Donald Trump or his character that turns you off so much?
Yeah, and I would say turns me off less, and I can dive into that. So I consider myself an independent. I just don't like the two-party system. I live in a suburb of a major progressive city, so I'm the kind of voter, right, that both parties want to try to appeal to. I've been a split-ticket voter in the past, probably not this year. It's going to be very hard for a Democrat to convince me, given all the challenges we're having in Seattle around crime and taxation, to vote for them. For me, I'll be honest, one of the things it was in 2016 was the fake news thing. I didn't like it. We went through a big change in the media, local media in Seattle, where we felt a lot of the impacts of the fake news narrative. You know, fast forward, now I really kind of understand what he was saying. I think it was used with too broad of a brush. So I felt personally attacked by that in 2016, even though there might have been some merit to it. Like, look, I look back, Tommy, at some of my old reporting and I'm like, oh, you know, so I'll just be frank about it. I didn't like that in particular. And also, you know, Access Hollywood tape, how he speaks about women cheating on your wife. That doesn't appeal to me as a person. And I don't like that we have to choose between policies we like and someone's personality. I wish we could get both, like a president who I thought he had a good personality and a good moral compass, and I happen to like his politics. Like, that would be nice. It's not what we're going to get this time around with either of them, but that's where I went to the, I think, level where I'd use the phrase despise.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's easy to focus on Donald Trump's character and his morals because he's been in the public eye and because he's been a reality star. I mean, he has been really a figment of pop culture for as long as I can remember, certainly my lifetime. But I think it's interesting that Donald Trump gets so much criticism by the moral police when you've got people like Joe Biden. I mean, let's dig in. Accusations against him as well. Bill Clinton, let's not get started. Hillary Clinton, the bimbo eruption team that she led up to try to silence women. I mean, you voted for Hillary, and she's got a lot of questionable morals there. But then also, when we look at somebody that I actually think is going to be the Democrat nominee, and that's Gavin Newsom, also a cheater. I would say even worse than Donald Trump, because if you're messing around with your campaign manager's wife, I think that is even more morally compromising than Donald Trump, who said, some locker room talk. But I just think it's interesting that it's so easy to look at Donald Trump and say he's a bad, morally corrupt man. I mean, find me a politician, maybe outside of Governor Ron DeSantis and some few others. I think most of them have checkered past and maybe some moral decisions that the religious right or the moral left would be objectionable about.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I agree 100%. And I am glad to hear you say that you think it's Gavin Newsom. I still, to this day, it's no way it's going to be Biden. It is 100% going to be Gavin Newsom. He's clearly running for president. I don't know how they're going to make the swap, but they're going to do it. It's got to be soon. Whenever I tell people I voted for Hillary Clinton, I get the reaction that you gave me, and I have to remind them I was 26. I was 26. I was like fairly new in the media circles, and I was obviously way too impressionable, and wasn't awake enough to some of the things that she had done that were also morally questionable. And what Trump had done that was morally questionable was all over the news all the time. And I was really drinking the mainstream media Kool-Aid at the time. And so I don't make any excuses for that. But when it comes to a lot of the politicians now, I agree 100%. They're just as morally bankrupt. The media doesn't talk about it as much, with Biden in particular. Gavin Newsom, you make some great points about his infidelity, and also old clips of how he treated the media in California throughout his political career when he wasn't asked the questions that he thought he should have been asked. There's some brutal clips of him berating media, walking away from interviews. So when I knocked Trump for his fake news narrative in 2016, man, Gavin Newsom was treating the media like crap well before 2016.
Yeah, and I would also say to that point, your personal feelings about the fake news comment of it all, and we're going off on a tangent, but that's fine. For me, as somebody who works in conservative media, as somebody who's been at Fox News, going on my 8th year at Fox News, coming in during the first Trump administration, hopefully be there for the second Trump administration, I'm excited about. But I'll tell you this. The leftist liberal Democrat candidates, not only are they rude about Fox News and always have been, but they won't sit down, with few exceptions, and talk to people on Fox News. Donald Trump might say CNN or MSNBC or whatever else is fake news, but he sits down and he does interviews, and they're hostile interviews. So I get his perspective on that. And when they lie on him, and they constantly lie on him, I don't blame him for calling them fake news. And I personally, as somebody who's in conservative media, I get a kick out of it. But I want to I want to talk about something also, getting back on track, that's kind of related to that. And that's Jen Psaki, who considers herself a journalist. Okay. So now she has been forced to edit her book because she said that actually Joe Biden wasn't checking his watch during that dignified transfer of those that we lost in Afghanistan. What do you make of that? And do you think that her journalistic credibility might be under question?
Well, of course, she's not a journalist. And for a long time, I mean, George Stephanopoulos, going back, all the network news outlets are guilty of hiring political, cronies of presidents and former press secretaries, et cetera. What it comes down to for me is how they're framed to the audience. Are they framed as someone who's just strictly there to do political commentary, or are they framed as someone who is to be trusted journalistically, which clearly MSNBC is trying to frame Jen Psaki in that way, which is just absurd. I mean, she was the mouthpiece for a president. I don't care if you're the mouthpiece for a Republican or a Democrat president. At the end of the day, you were a mouthpiece for a president, and that doesn't just disappear from you, right? I struggle with this one because I don't know, did she convince herself he hadn't looked at his watch that much?
I mean, the photos are there. Once again, we want to believe Jen Psaki or our lying eyes? She knew. She's not stupid. She knows he was checking his watch. I mean, to try to say that he wasn't, I mean, there's the photo. How do you argue with that? It's not AI.
Well, and also I would say it's not just Jen Psaki. There were fact checks done at the time by the media on this claim that Biden was looking at his watch during the dignified transfer. And the fact checks, gosh, I don't want to get it wrong. I want to say it was USA Today. It was USA Today, 2021. They had to correct a fact check where they also push that narrative that, no, it was afterward, despite what the Gold Star families were saying. Like, no, he was looking at his watch while the remains of our loved ones who died under his watch were being transferred. And so the media is complicit too. And obviously Jen Psaki's going to have a little book edit to make.
Yeah. Well, and then to be fair, I obviously talked last week at length about the governor of my home state of South Dakota, who also had to edit her book because she's a nincompoop and a narcissist. And she, I guess she forgot that she didn't meet Kim Jong-un. I don't know how you forget that. I mean, sometimes you forget you meet somebody that you met before at a party. I don't think you forget meeting the dictator of North Korea, but that's another story, just to show you that, you know, we can be fair in our coverage and it doesn't matter ideologically where people stand. Let's just call liars liars and be done with it. The other thing I want to talk to you about, though, is kind of because you are in Seattle, so I find this an interesting conversation. First of all, I don't know why you live in Seattle. I'm sure it's beautiful, but my God. I want to talk to you about something that Target did. This is more on the pop culture side, but it is getting closer to the middle of May, which means we're probably just days away from the Pride stuff coming out in full force. Oh, yippee-ki-yay. But Target, in certain places, I would assume Tennessee being one of those places, is going to cut back on their Pride displays, their dunk tucking, underwear, and that kind of thing in certain places because of the backlash they got last year. I would assume in Seattle they're probably going to go full force. I don't know what it's going to look like where you are, but I'm curious to know, as somebody who's maybe a former more liberal, kind of independent now, I'm curious to hear what you make of this decision and if you think the Bud Light treatment maybe did some good for Target.
Yeah, and look, I don't care what Target sells. I mean, what do they do during Christmas? They had the Black Santa paraplegic ornament. Like, you do you. If somebody wants to buy it, fine. So it didn't really bother me that they wanted to sell Pride stuff. I think the issue is, because you as a consumer, right? I think it's fine. You can decide what you want to do. And clearly Target saw that consumers were revolting a little bit. So they're making a course correct and a decision that they're not going to display it as prominently as they had. I mean, first of all, I want to go back to something you said earlier. It's always Pride Month in Seattle.
Yeah.
So it's just Pride year. So Pride Month for us doesn't really seem like much of a change. But, again, there was a couple things that did bother me of the Pride, and I consider myself an ally. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are gay, and I would never want them to obviously feel discriminated against. But I think in this Pride climate, the idea that they're being discriminated against in any fashion would be absolutely absurd, especially in the Seattle area. But it was some of the things like the swimsuits with the tucking,
Yeah.
and the stuff that was clearly branded for children.
Yeah.
Like, if you're a parent and you want to buy your kid that, fine. I think it's a little strange when you're talking about Pride, you're talking about someone's sexuality, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about their preferences with who they're sexually attracted to and who they feel romantic feelings for. Like, why does a child need to wear something like that? That's what's strange to me.
Yeah, that's child abuse in my book. Parents are, obviously allowed to do what they want to do. As far as that goes, I personally would label it child abuse to tell your kid that doesn't know what they are, they're not old enough to tell them what their sexual preferences, I think is gross, quite frankly. But I just think it's interesting that it's one thing when you've got rainbow stuff, like whatever. I'm not offended by people wearing their rainbow stuff. That's fine. But some of this stuff that they put out there, it's not just like, hey, here's the rainbow. Like, I'm proud to be who I am, which I think was the initial intention of Pride, is like, this is me. This is who I am. I'm just like you. I just happen to be a little different. I'm proud of it. All good. Now it's like queer and proud. Every day is queer day. Here's, this is, I'm trans and I will always be trans, or trans people will always exist, or queer queen, or some. It's weird to me. And, beyond that, Target has been doing this with every special month that they have. I always think it's weird too when I go to some place like Target, which is a big box store, and it's Black History Month and they have to have like, I'm a Black queen or Black and beautiful or whatever. It's like, if you feel that way about yourself, you should feel that way about yourself. But why do they need to market this stuff? And why do they need to push it on everybody in such a way where it's like they would never be able to do that the other way? Can you imagine like straight and proud, white and proud? That would be a hate crime.
Yeah, it's always stunning to me that people don't see that, that you would never allow, same with these campus protests. If it were right wingers, drawing swastikas or whatever, they would last 1 second on a campus like the University of Washington. So there's always that insane hypocrisy, on the pushing it on you thing. I went to a hockey game. We have an awesome hockey team in Seattle, the Kraken, beautiful arena. This was February, that's what I say, it's always Pride in Seattle. The entire game was a Pride game. So the jerseys, all the coloring, all the sponsors around the arena were in rainbow. Everything, every person who they spoke to in the breaks were it was about Pride, and I was just like, can I just watch them fight? All I came for was for them to punch each other. Like, why do I have to sit through 3 hours of Pride in order to watch a hockey game?
Yeah, it's forced pride. And a lot of those athletes, they don't want to do it, but then they have to do it because if they don't do it, then they're labeled homophobic or transphobic or racist or you name it. Good friend of mine lost his job as a pitcher for the Blue Jays, actually, to make this come full circle because he posted about Target and Bud Light. So it only goes one way. Now, if he had put something out about how he loved queer people and queer and proud and I'm an ally to LGBTQ, he would be hailed. He wouldn't be fired. So it's the double standard that really rubs me the wrong way. I always appreciate your take. I'm glad that you are a recovering I wouldn't even call you a liberal, recovering Hillary voter. That's a proud thing to say, that you are recovering from that. That's not something that, I would necessarily be proud to admit that I voted for Hillary, but I'm glad that you wear it and you've learned from it. And I hope that you will vote for Donald J. Trump in November. And I hope that more people like you will vote for Donald J. Trump in November because we got to get our country back.
Yeah, I didn't know we were going to dive into all that. I got a lot of skeletons out of my closet. We should do this once a month and I can stop paying my therapist.
There you go. It's a cathartic release, really. And I appreciate having you and always appreciate your perspective. Stay safe in Seattle, where it's always Pride Month and always Homeless Month, too. God bless you. I appreciate you being here. All right, folks. UNC Chapel Hill votes to dismantle its DEI program and divert funds to campus police. Forget what the fake news media tells you. Woke is dying, and it's just a beautiful sight to behold. It's also time for final thoughts. So yesterday I showed you a clip of the little terrorist vandalizing UNC Chapel Hill. Now, and as much as that footage really ticks me off, I am happy to report, folks, that UNC Chapel Hill will not sit idly by and do nothing about it. Instead, the UNC at Chapel Hill Board of Trustees voted to dismantle the university's DEI programs and divert that $2.3 million they were wasting on woke to the campus police and public safety measures. It gets even better. The whole North Carolina State Public University system may follow suit on restricting those BS DEI programs in a vote next week. So does this signal a sea change? Well, perhaps, but I think this move by UNC Chapel Hill also kicks off another trend that might be a surprising saving grace: the resurgence of the patriotic frat boy. Now, hear me out. I, too, never thought it would be frat boys to the rescue, but it does seem to me that, at least in a public sense, it's been the frat boys serving as the antidote to the little terrorists and the green-haired madness on college campuses. Maybe it's even broader than that. Maybe patriotic frat boys will also be the right's response to the left's angry, bitter, unshaven, woke woman trend. I mean, take a look at the people protesting for Hamas, for climate change, for the Rainbow Mafia. Mostly angry white women in masks with rage problems. Now, polls indicate that while young women are getting more liberal, young men are getting more conservative. And while I do hope that young women see the light at some point, I do think we should lean into this resurgence, however small it may be, of young men taking back their masculinity and owning their patriotism. Now, the libs deem it toxic masculinity, but that's simply because the left is dead set on erasing manly men and replacing them with gender-confused they-thems, and it was working. But perhaps they overplayed their hand. Now, maybe the key to healing America is not only better parenting, but making men men again. Well, it's a start, and it's a good one. I've always kind of winced at the frat boy aesthetic, but shoot, frat boy summer may not be such a bad thing after all. And those are my final thoughts. Please be sure to go visit the brand new Tomi Lahren is Fearless YouTube channel. Like and subscribe for full episodes. And I will see you right back here live at 1 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. But until then, from Nashville, God bless and take care.